Welcome to Democratic Dialogues. I'm Pamela Schwartz, and I'm your hostess for today. Our guest is Alana Murphy, and she is the Director of Policy for the Department of Housing and Community Development in the state. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Now, I wanted to ask you, you've been associated with the Democratic Party for many years.
I have been. I'm one of those congenital Democrats, born a Democrat, in a Democratic family, in Boston, grew up in Boston politics, and was first elected to the state committee in 1984 by beating Louise Day Hicks, a name that some people still remember.
Yes, I remember it very well. That must have been quite a campaign. I would have liked to have seen that.
It was fun.
I think we're having rather an interesting campaign now for the United States Senate. Can you tell me how you feel about that?
Well, obviously, I am a strong supporter of Martha Coakley, and I have to say that it is absolutely outrageous that Scott Brown is running the campaign he's running. He's running a Mitt Romney campaign. He's running as somebody he isn't. He's a conservative Democrat, conservative Republican, who's not going to represent this state well. He's not going to represent the values that I think most of the state holds dear. He won't be a strong fighter for the health care issue that was so dear to Senator Kennedy's heart, and it's just very dismaying to see the type of candidate he's running, the candidacy he's running. I'm glad the polls are coming out now, though, that show that the race is tightening up a little bit. That shows what a candidate can do when they don't present themselves as themselves, say what they think the voters want to hear. But it also means that the Coakley supporters won't take it for granted, that we're going to be going out, we're going to be working hard, we're going to be making those phone calls, taking people by the hand and getting them down to the polls.
I agree with that. I also feel that he has portrayed himself as a Shyamalan to me. Mm-hmm. Instead of using John Kennedy, the best well-known Democrat in Massachusetts, and fading into Scott Brown, why didn't he use Henry Cabot Lodge? Why didn't he use any of the Republicans so that people would know who he is? Then to drive in his truck and say, I drive a truck. I thought, yes, that's for this hour. Yeah. And I'm sure it's not the only vehicle they have in the family. And I feel like I'm being tricked.
You are being tricked.
And I don't like it. I'm angry. I'm very angry. I was not angry before. I didn't know who Scott Brown was. Mm-hmm. But in the last 2 weeks, I have gotten very angry. Yeah. I have worked for Martha Coakley from the beginning, and I will continue. But I will tell you, if anything energized her workers, this is it. Oh,
I absolutely agree. And he is trying to trick the voters. It's why the polls have tightened up. But I will say that the people who determine the elections are not the ones who respond to polls. The people who determine the outcome of the election are the ones who go to the polls and vote on Tuesday, January 19th, and vote for the best candidate, who is Martha Coakley.
I thought it showed in the debate last night, because I thought it showed that she may not be the most exciting candidate, but she's the hardest working. And what she says, she means. Mm-hmm. We in Gloucester had a very good taste of what Martha Coakley can do. And when she says, I'll be here, she comes. Mm-hmm. We called her. We needed help with a situation. She came. She assessed it, went back to Boston, and took action. Mm-hmm. I don't think you can say anything better about a candidate than that. She came, she saw, she conquered.
Yep, I absolutely agree in that she has done that throughout her career.
Yes, she has. Yep. She's there, and I think she will be there. In Washington, she'll be just as much there for us.
And the fact that Scott Brown thinks that he is comparable to Princess Diana, I think kind of sums up his approach to politics.
Yes, it does. That's not an elected position, Princess.
No, it's not. No.
Maybe he's not aware of that. But anyway.
But we've also seen something that Martha Coakley has done that relates to the work I do every day in housing and with the foreclosure crisis. She actually went after the mortgage brokers who were writing those predatory mortgages. The Fremont company, for instance, got a settlement from them. She has gone after the people who are responsible for some of the foreclosure crisis here in Massachusetts. And it's that type of creative aggression, I think, that will serve us well in the Senate.
Yes, and I think she's used this as they keep referring, well, you're a lawyer. Yes, that's how she started. But I think each job she grows into and then exceeds. And I foresee the same thing as a senator.
Absolutely, and you know, the healthcare issue is probably on the top of everybody's agenda right now. This is an imperfect bill that is going through the Congress right now. Everybody knows it's imperfect, and if we want somebody who's going to go in there and work to try to make it better, this is the first cut at healthcare. And I think it also is probably in the spirit of the way Ted Kennedy worked for 47 years. You might have to make some compromises, but you don't give up your values, and you work to continue to make that better. She's got 3 years now. With luck, she'll have another 6 years to try to take some of the issues around healthcare. It's not a perfect bill. Make it better so that, you know, we do have something that really does represent what this country should be about in terms of taking care of people and offering them legitimate, affordable health care options.
It reminded me of what Benjamin Franklin said at the end of the Constitutional Convention in 1787. He said, it's not perfect.
Yeah.
It may not be the best form, but it's the best we have.
That's right.
And I feel that's probably true of the health bill today in 2010, January. Doesn't mean we can't make it better.
We had to amend the Constitution.
We've amended the Constitution,
Yeah.
and that's a pretty great document.
It certainly is.
And it was the amendments that have made it better. And it's people like Martha Coakley who go to Congress and work on it. I also feel that people in Massachusetts elected Ted Kennedy to do the job they wanted done and to progress with the programs that they need. We're in a lot of trouble here in Massachusetts, and we need somebody who's very well versed in the needs. And I think she is in touch with the everyday people of the state, the people who are laid off, the people who have lost their health insurance, and there's a lot of them.
And I think she also understands what it means to serve the people.
Yes.
And I'll go back to a Ted Kennedy piece. When he was being challenged by Mitt Romney, he was, I believe it was Mitt Romney. He was, it was the tightest probably race of his career. And David Broder, the Washington Post, was in Massachusetts looking at the race. And what he said afterwards is he traveled across the Commonwealth, stopping at the truck stops, stopping into the diners, and talking to people about what they thought. They would say, you know, I don't know, Ted Kennedy, he's been there a long time, but, you know, when my mother-in-law had trouble with her Social Security check, his office straightened it out. And Broder said that there was a story like that every place he stopped. And he said if Ted Kennedy had touched every family's life just about in Massachusetts one way or the other, if Martha Coakley can take that lesson and continue the work that she's doing as she has been as DA and as Attorney General and touch people's lives in a very personal way, in a way that makes a difference to them, I think that she will have that same type of sort of reservoir of goodwill built up in her Senate career.
Can you tell me a little bit about what's happening in your department? Because at this economic time, I would imagine you're very busy.
Oh, yes, we are busy. We actually have quite a few $1 million in the federal stimulus funds coming through. But we're also dealing with the foreclosure crisis. Our department picks up from post-foreclosure, the neighborhood stabilization. What happens to a neighborhood when houses are abandoned, they're foreclosed upon, they become vacant, they become a blight to the neighborhood and the community. And we're seeing that there are some areas, like Lawrence, for instance, that are absolutely devastated. Cape Ann has been very lucky. We have not seen the level of foreclosures in Cape Ann that we have in some other parts of the state, partially because I think it's a smaller market. It's also, people tend to go to the local banks, which did a much better job underwriting the mortgage. They weren't going to try to sell you a mortgage that you absolutely could not afford. And we don't have that type of predatory lending. Doesn't mean it didn't happen here in Cape Ann. There are foreclosures. They are all around us, but we are lucky. What we're seeing now are fewer foreclosures but more petitions to foreclose, which is the first step. When the bank sends a letter saying, we're going to foreclose on your property because you are late, that number is rising. The number of actual foreclosures when the bank takes it back is falling. It can take a year or more to get through that process. We're seeing the foreclosures that are due to those predatory lenders, the reset of the adjustable rate mortgages, that type of subprime mortgage. We're seeing those foreclosures declining. More foreclosures now are caused by economic difficulties through job losses. The unemployment rate is having a tremendous effect on the number of foreclosures. So we haven't seen the end of the foreclosure crisis yet. And what we are doing now with some of the federal money is trying to go back into the neighborhoods, actually we're not doing it, but we're trying to enable some of the organizations and even private developers to acquire properties, rehabilitate them, and turn them into affordable housing for the people who want to live in the neighborhood, to bring back some of these really devastated neighborhoods. So.
Yeah, some of those neighborhoods in the larger cities and the old, they were factory cities, they've really gone down, and there's nothing to pick them up right now. Now, can help be gotten at your agency? Or at least advice or steering people?
Absolutely, advice and steering. And also we have the mass.gov website that has a lot of information about what to do if you're at risk of being foreclosed upon, where to get information about help that's available. I'll mention another, which is not foreclosure related, but it's help that people can get, and that's the weatherization program. The federal stimulus bill gave Massachusetts $122 million for weatherization. Action Inc. here in Gloucester is the local weatherization agency, and people who might need some help getting their home weatherized should go to Action Inc. and talk to them about what they can do, because depending upon your income, there are income limits, but you can get help getting your home weatherized, and a lot of people actually see a 30% decrease in their heating bills after a good weatherization job.
Which is going to help at this particular time.
Yeah.
And with 20 degrees temperature and what are we having, 20 mile an hour winds, that's going to be a very important part.
That's right.
Another thing that I wanted to ask you about, which comes in with the working situation now, people losing their jobs, is that many women have entered the workforce on a full-time basis when before they may have been on a part-time basis. And I know that you worked on a commission for women that tried to help them get back into the workplace. Are there still obstacles such as daycare, limited daycare and limited transportation to women trying to get into the work field?
There are still obstacles. There are a lot of obstacles. There are also obstacles around access to training jobs. There are obstacles around having a job at the other end of your training. It is not easy. I think people are more aware of the barriers that a lot of particular single moms face in getting back into the workforce. People are more aware of daycare problems. There probably is more access now. There's more support. There are tax credits, there are vouchers, there are things that the government has tried to do to cobble together a response, because people have to work in this economy. There are more and more restrictions on the help that government can give people. So people have to get back. Even if you're in a nuclear family with two parents, with 2 children, in order to maintain a status quo now, you have to have both people working, if you're lucky enough to be both working, if you're not just working part-time. So, yes, there are still barriers. There's more awareness of the need and of the barriers. I think that there's more of a focus on it. You mentioned a job that I had way back in the early 1980s when I was the special advisor to Mayor of Boston, Ray Flynn. I worked on women's issues. And it was it was interesting because then there really were severe problems, a huge
Yes.
lack of daycare, huge lack of daycare. People didn't understand that you had to travel. If you were a single mom, trying to get into work, your workplace might have daycare, but to take 2 buses and a train to get your 2 kids into your workplace for a childcare facility was quite...
At 6:30 in the morning.
At 6:30 in the morning. That was so it was great for the folks who drove into work and parked under the building and brought their kids to the childcare center right there in the building, but it wasn't all that, the receptionists who might have lived down in Dorchester or Mattapan to get down to downtown Boston, it wasn't as easy. It is easier now.
Believe me, I'm very well aware of it. I've worked all of my married life,
Yeah.
and we had 3 children. And I finally got to the point where I said, I've got to do something. Daycare isn't an answer. So I went to work 11 to 7 at night.
Yeah.
I had that opportunity because I worked in medicine, and the hospitals don't close.
Yeah.
But when you've worked 10 nights in a row, 11 to 7, and you come home at 7 in the morning and your 8-year-old says, don't forget, we've got the field trip today, Mama. We're going to Boston to the Constitution. And you go, oh, I can't wait. And off you go. It was a great drain. So now I'm into a second generation. And this second generation is my daughter, who, again, is married, has 3 children. She and her husband both work. But my husband and I are able to take care of the children for her because we all live together. We've established the Waltons on Cape Ann.
Yep.
We all say, good night, John Boy. Good night, Mary Ellen.
Yep.
And we're there when the kids come home.
Yep.
And this makes the better situation. Not that daycare isn't a great situation, because it is. And I have several great nieces and nephews that are in it and flourishing. But you have to be particular. And you have to be wary.
Yes.
You have to be very wary, and that's why I think state licensure is so important. And yet there are so many people that just open it up on the QT, and that's a danger to women and a danger to their children.
Yeah.
Not the husbands or fathers are not as concerned, but I don't think we have fully come across that now men go to work with the thoughts of their children here in their mind, as women have done. I also have to wonder if the prominence of women coming into the political field has helped women and will continue to help women. It said, was watching the news the other day, there were 2 women ambassadors in Washington, D.C. in the late 1990s. Today there are 25. You've got to know that Hillary Clinton has something to do with that.
Oh, absolutely.
We here on Cape Ann, we now have a female state representative. We have in Gloucester, we have a female mayor. And we've never had an elected female mayor before. We had an honorary mayor.
Sure.
And she was a wonderful woman named Beatrice Collis. But these women are working women as well as mothers. They're trying to handle it all, as the people are. So therefore, I think they have a greater knowledge, and I think that more will come. What do you think?
Oh, we can only get better. And I think having people like Ann Margaret, like Carolyn Kirk, in office really does help. And it also gives young girls role models. They can look at Mayor Kirk. They can look at Representative Ferrante. They can look at Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. They can look at Hillary Clinton who almost became president, as a role model. It does help. Incremental steps are still steps forward. It is still tougher though for women. I think the money aspect of running for office has probably evened out a little bit, but there are still different expectations. There are higher expectations. There are different, probably unfair criticisms of female candidates that are not made of male candidates. It's still a
Nobody
tougher...
cares how a man wears his hair.
No, no. No, although they did care when Governor Patrick went bald there for a little bit.
Yeah.
So they cared about that, and they made their feelings known. But that was one of the few times, I think, that you've seen people saying, wait a minute, you can't wear your hair like that. But no, it is still tougher. But I think, and it's also still tougher for a female candidate without supports at home. For a woman who has children, who has to take care of children, still do the ironing, and some of those things. If you don't have a spouse, it is, I think, still more difficult for women than it is for men.
Well, we had a very interesting experience about a year ago. I'm part of the DAR, the Daughters of the American Revolution, and we give out an award for good citizenship to 11 schools in the north east area. And we had 1 male and 10 females. 7 of the 10 females, they were career-oriented to going into politics. The male was going into nursing.
Interesting.
And I'm a very sentimental person. And as I watched these young people come up who are absolutely wonderful, when you start to feel badly about society, go see some young people because you won't feel badly about it anymore. You just have to go find them. And they were making their little speeches, and the thoughts to me were, I'm looking and saying, at my time of age then, you could have been a nurse, a teacher, or got married, and the sooner the better. And here these women are planning out their careers into the most marvelous fields. And isn't it wonderful that a young man could stand up and say, I want to be a nurse?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Because not everybody can be a doctor. But that doesn't mean they're not very good caregivers. And it doesn't mean that they're not very empathetic and wonderful people that want to give. So the males in the nursing profession have, one thing they've done is they've helped save the women's backs.
Yes, right. That's right.
You know, lift, tug.
And I think actually...
And it's given a whole new aspect. Some men are so much more comfortable talking to the men.
Yeah. I also think that military service has helped men accept the role of nurse.
So do I.
And that's made a difference. Military service in this day and age is a little bit, it's a little bit controversial. It is a place where people can go and be employed now without worrying about the job market, but it's also a place where they can go and be put in harm's way in Afghanistan, Iraq, and you know, it's not.
It's a two-edged sword. Well, it's been very interesting speaking with you this morning, and I'm sure we could probably go on for a lot more. But we come from a certain generation, and it is wonderful to see the progress, isn't it?
There has been progress. Yes, there has been. It's again, some of it has been incremental. Some of it fits and starts. You take a great leap forward, and then, you know, we had Evelyn Murphy as lieutenant governor. Great leap forward, and then we went back into a little bit of a hiatus there. But we are working on these things, and I think we'll see more and more women in politics, and particularly maybe in the U.S. Senate here from Massachusetts.
Yes, I think maybe. One of the things that my hero growing up was Eleanor Roosevelt, because I think she had the absolute most metamorphic life of anyone I have ever read about. She went from one person and totally changed into another. And sometimes when I felt down and I think of Eleanor, I think, no, she did it. And look what she had to work against. And she was a symbol for me. And it was a wonderful moment when I went to a women's convention and they were highlighting Eleanor Roosevelt. And I think someday we'll be highlighting Hillary Clinton and saying, this woman almost broke the glass ceiling, but made it possible for someone else. And I think that young women like Anne Margaret Ferranti, I think Martha Coakley, we're going to have a lot more of them. And we need them. And look out, guys, because we're coming. We're really coming this time. I just wanted to ask you one thing, because it's kind of was annoying to me, and I don't know how you felt about it. When I read that, a letter to the editor in the Gloucester Times last weekend was, I know that John Kennedy would have voted for Scott Brown. And I thought,
Well,
maybe George Washington would be voting for Martha.
I know I'm voting for Martha. I know I'm not voting for Scott Brown, and I doubt very much if John Kennedy would have voted for
I
Scott
am
Brown
so
because
sure of
John
it.
Kennedy was a Democrat. He had democratic values, held democratic principles, believed in a country that took care of its people. Scott Brown does not. There is no way in the world John Kennedy would have voted for Scott Brown, and Scott Brown's arrogance just comes through every time he compares himself to John Kennedy. When he compares himself to any other hero in our country, it is more than dismaying. It's just a really treacherous way to run a race.
I agree with you. And I hope that we'll be working on many more campaigns.
I'm sure we will.
Because I've enjoyed sitting here and talking with you now. Is there anything that you would like to ask me about?
How did you get involved in the Gloucester Democratic politics and the Democratic City Committee?
I was born into it.
Yep.
Yep. It's sort of like, it was my inheritance.
Okay.
Okay. My father and mother were the absolute poster children for the Depression.
Yeah.
And they came through it all, the CCC camps. My mother was one of 11, my father one of 8. My mother's father lost his job, and my father's father kept working, but it wasn't very much money.
Yeah.
And then along came World War II, which is when they were getting married and when they started having their family. A very poignant story to me, because it involves them and me, is when she was in the hospital giving birth to me. It was the day before Franklin Roosevelt died. And that morning when he died and they announced it, she was utterly devastated. She said she could not understand how the world would continue because she hadn't known another president. He had become president when she was 10 years old. She had never, knowingly another president. And what was going to happen? Her husband was in the South Pacific. She had 2 little children. And she thought the world was over.
Yeah.
And whenever these things happen, someone comes along, and I hope that they'll come along now. Yep. Again, I want to thank you for being here for Democratic Dialogues, but I want to tell everyone, please get out and vote on January 19th, Tuesday. It's a very important election. Don't put it off. It might be cold. It might seem like, why me? But you're important. Every single voter in Massachusetts is important and needs to be there. So I'm Pamela Schwartz, and I'm thanking you for spending this half hour with Alana Murphy and myself, and have a good day.